Good evening, everyone. My name is Charity Rouse, and I am the Director of Local History for the Spartanburg County Public Libraries. We are delighted to share these genealogy programs, our first Monday series between October and June, with you and online on Zoom, as well as recorded for YouTube. Our Spartanburg County Public Libraries YouTube channel has a genealogy playlist, and it has lots and lots of resources available to you there, as well as the live. Tonight, we're going to be talking about researching your African American ancestors. One note about the gentleman in the photo on this slide. His name is George Mullins, otherwise known as Trottin' Sally, and he was a fiddle player and a bricklayer in Spartanburg, and just a folk legend in the area. He also outran a train. So feel free to look into his story if you're interested. So I'm going to break this into a couple of sections, and we're not going to cover every single one of these items because we'd be here all night. But there are some different resources and some of the same resources before and after 1865 to 1870. So these are some of the types of records that you can find and research 1870 to current. Bible records, which may be in the hands of family members, photographs also, school records, letters, obituaries, or funeral programs. Those may be found at home or in the home of the other family member who is interested in genealogy. Um, some of these I have also already covered in recent programs or will cover soon. And so I'm not going to get into them very much tonight at all. But wills, estates, probate records, vital records, property records, deeds, land, etc. Military records and church records are all previous presentations I have done, and those can be found on the library's YouTube channel in the genealogy playlist. I'll be talking about census records in detail for the April program, so we'll look at some of these other records tonight. But they're things to remember to take a look at because, talking through family customs and traditions can be helpful. Sometimes these customs are passed along, and sometimes these customs are more recent adaptations in the family, so sometimes they aren't your family's customs. But stories and oral history are a huge part of the African American experience. So, some of the other records include photographs. You may find photographs in the family collections. You may also find them online on Ancestry or Family Search or MyHeritage or a local Facebook group or a genealogy Facebook group. Local historical societies are also really good places to check. But do your best to verify it's actually your ancestors, not just a random photo of a friend's family. I have about 800 photographs from my great-grandmother's estate, and some of them are mislabeled because there are two houses. My father labeled as Uncle Walter's house. They are very close to each other, but they're not the same house. So unless Uncle Walter, great Uncle Walter to my dad, had two houses that looked very much the same, they may not be the same house. My father was doing the best that he could in the 1980s, interviewing people to identify photographs, but not all of the identification may be correct. But also in that collection, we have a lot of photographs that her pen pals sent to her distant cousins, second and third cousins that she was in contact with, also sent her photographs. Presumably she sent them photographs of her family as well. So do kind of check through to make sure you can identify at least someone in the photo so that you know who that group is. This is an unknown group in our library collection um, of an African American mother and presumably her children. So we're always looking to help identify our own things in our collection. So we have quite a few digital collections, and I'm going to highlight a few that are specific to our African American community. And these are just a small snapshot, to use a photographic analogy, of what we have in our collections. So if you see something on here and you want to know whether we have additional collections relating to a family or a school or other things, feel free to reach out to the library. Information is on the Historical Digital Collections main page, landing page, above where I've got the screenshot. You may also find some of these items at home in an inherited box. So, of these, we're going to look at three. We've got the Bessie Norris Wofford Collected Funeral Home Programs collection. The earliest is in 1957, the latest is in 1991. In the African American community, in that time period, African Americans did not always get obituaries in the newspaper. And so these funeral home programs um, and funeral programs can be really helpful because they often include an obituary. The Black History in Spartanburg collection has some great resources and photographs of our Woolworth sit-in, among other things. And then our Carver High School um, yearbook collection. So not everything is made it online. These things we have tried to add to as we have items and time. But again, feel free to reach out and ask further questions. So, what is a funeral program? It is the bulletin of the funeral service. This is for Mrs. Blanche B. Wofford at Mount Moriah Baptist Church, Spartanburg, South Carolina, Thursday, April 6th of 1961 at 3:30 p.m. Inside the program is a copy of the obituary and the service outline. It even tells us which songs were sung, which isn't always the case. On the back, it lists flower bearers, pallbearers, and the funeral home. Now, funeral home, this happened to be Woodward Funeral Home. They may or may not have additional information, but they're always a good place to check. However, I do have to sometimes remind my genealogists, probably not you all, but some of my other genealogists who come to visit, that genealogists are not paying the funeral home's bills, and the families who are currently using their services are higher on the priority list than your genealogical quest. So be very nice, be understanding if it takes them a little bit to get back. Do not call them day after day after day to nag them. Um, if you don't get a response, wait a week or two, 3 weeks, call back. Maybe you'll get a different person who's more interested. Maybe call it a different time of day. And very often, when the funeral home is not busy, someone on their staff is willing to go look through their boxes, find the information. Sometimes it's on a computer and they can look it up quickly, but sometimes they have 7 funerals that week and you're just not the priority. So, just as a reminder, um, but these can be a treasure trove of information about the family, just like obituaries in general can be. You can also learn things about what civic clubs they were involved in, or who the minister was, what the church, who was what church they went to, those types of things, which leads you to church records and other records like that. Also, in this collection, there were a couple other treasures that were related. This happens to be a minister's business card, and he may be your family member. I don't know if you have Spartanburg roots. But A.M. Matthews, you get his address on East Clement Street, and you get that he was a minister at two churches, Foster's Chapel Baptist Church in Roebuck and Harrison's Grove Baptist Church in Walnut Grove, South Carolina. And his motto was friendship, fellowship makes it possible for good leadership. So looks like a very cool guy. But that may tell you more about where the person who had the card went to church or was friendly with the person or that kind of thing. And again, if it is someone in your family, you just hit a jackpot. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our Black History and Spartanburg collection on the historical digital collections. Um, Often when there are um, challenging materials, um, items that are very much of a time period and not at all how we would interpret or present things today. But as historians, we are dedicated to presenting what happened at the time. Sometimes that's pretty, sometimes that's really ugly. Sometimes the language used is not, again, currently politically correct. And so we do put some disclaimers and information about each collection. And if there are some things, we have a college yearbook collection that there are some 1930s yearbooks that have um, like a KKK club. It's not pretty, but it is the historical record of that time and place. So again, you never know what you're going to find, but um, we have some information here about the Black community in Spartanburg County. And I'd like to remind you that even though family research can often feel lonely with you sitting at your computer by yourself, you're not alone. You've got librarians, archivists, and other researchers out there who reach out. Now, they're not going to do the research for you, generally speaking, but they can certainly help point you to different archives and records and family members and information. Um, for those researching the enslaved and free people of color, just a note about numbers of people. Um, Spartanburg had 866 Black enslaved and 27 free people of color in 1790. And that was about 10% of the population. So remember, you're not always looking for enslaved. Sometimes your ancestor may have been one of the free people of color. So there are records that you want to look at for both populations to make sure you're doing as much general research as you can. By 1865, between 1865 and 1870, uh, at emancipation, there were about 8,300 African Americans in Spartanburg County, which was about 30% of the population. In raw numbers, we're still not talking huge numbers of people. Well, even in Spartanburg, there wasn't that large a population in 1865. Certainly nothing like our population today. So just remember that other people are going to be going back to this smaller population and researching, and we may find that a lot of things are uh, not as difficult as we thought they might be. Some things are going to be very difficult as we research the African Americans. So it just depends, and it depends on the time period. But one of the cool things we have in this collection are our three lonely editions in June and July 1929 of the Hub City Observer. This was an African American paper here in Spartanburg, published here, and we kind of know how long it lasted. It wasn't in publication for particularly long, but we know that it was in volume two in 1929. We live in hope that someone's going to find a full run of these in their attic and call us and say, would you like these? Um, don't know that it's going to happen, but cool things come into our room every single week. So we always are hopeful that these resources will come into us so that we can share them with our researchers. Um, Now, there were Black owned newspapers in other places, and they are great treasure troves because, like other newspapers of the day, they have things like Mrs. Smith was here last week visiting her mother. She was from Detroit. You know, those types of things. So you may find information in a paper in a different location than where you think it should be because family members moved to that location or a church was headquartered in a different area. And you may find news published where there is a larger presence of that church or in that church newspaper. Um, Church historical societies are a great place to look if you know what denomination the church is. Um, this is the Carver, a snapshot of part of our Carver High School yearbook collection. It's called The Tiger. And Carver High School was the African American high school in the city. Lincoln was one of the ones in the county. And it operated from 1938 to 1970 when it merged with Spartanburg High. The building then became a junior high, and I believe they changed the name of the yearbook, but we have yearbooks from the junior high as well. When I came to the Kennedy Room in 2014, we had one partial photocopy of a Carver yearbook. We now have 20 yearbooks in our digital collections and 13 physical copies on our shelf. We've got a long way to go because that's nowhere close to 1938 to 1970 worth of yearbooks. But we have made great strides in helping collect the materials about our African American brothers and sisters. So we have worked diligently to build trust between the African American community and the library as a steward of our whole county history. Having the digital collection does allow us to scan yearbooks and return the original to the person who owns them. So we are always looking out for yearbooks that we don't have, not just African American, any of our schools, that we can then digitize and then put up. We do generally use a 25-year restriction on anything we scan. Anything between 20 and 25 years, if we've scanned it and get a request for it, we'll pass those on. We just don't want to put uh, yearbooks up that may have anyone under 18 in them, and some of our schools do have 3K programs. So we've decided on that general rule of thumb. But if somebody's working on their 20th high school reunion and we have that yearbook, we can scan it and get them a copy as needed. But we are working hard And we are working hard to get out of the city of Spartanburg and into the Spartanburg County area for yearbooks and other resources to better tell the whole story of our whole county, not just African American, but all of the people of the county. Tonight we're talking about African Americans, however. Another resource that is available digitally is the Born in Slavery Slave Narratives from the Federal Writers Project, 1936 to 1938. This is on at the Library of Congress. And a couple things to remember. This was an oral history project done during the Works Progress Administration during the Great Depression. You may or may not find one of your relatives in this collection. Stories may have been sanitized because the interviewee was speaking with a white person and an unfamiliar, often Yankee white person. And so they weren't necessarily as comfortable. Some of them were just candid and told it like they saw it. Others were more circumspect as you read through these. However, you can get an idea of what life was like, especially for children during slavery, because these were done 71 to 73 years after emancipation. So even the children were in their 70s. So to get adults in their 80s and 90s and some in their hundreds was a really kind of special interview. Memories may be not as fresh as they might have been with those older interviewees, but it gives you a real snapshot of things that happened. Um, Community events are sometimes mentioned in these interviews, that kind of thing. You may be fortunate to find someone who was on the same plantation or at least in the same area as your ancestors were in. So, really worth checking this collection. We do have printed copies of the South Carolina interview transcripts um, that were printed years ago before this digital collection was available. So, it can be really helpful to look through those. And they do have some additional photos in this collection, um, in addition to the transcripts of the oral histories. I don't know that they have many of the actual recordings up. In fact, some of the interviews were probably done without a recording mechanism, although they existed at the time. So we're going to move back in time a little bit and look at some records that are 1870s and earlier. Um, some things are becoming digitized, um, and so becoming digital, and some of these we're going to look at. Um, Voter registration, the first one that everyone was included on was 1868. Freedmen's Bureau records in that 1865 to 1872 era. There were registers of freed blacks. Often the free person of color had to have a guardianship record. I don't have any of those images in this program, but I did a program a couple of years ago on freed blacks, free people of color, so you may want to check that out. You may find mentions in court records. Again, customs and traditions, stories, and oral histories are important to check. Those are usually going to be in the family's hands. Census, church records, if you know what church they went to. Some church clerks are more helpful than others, and some churches keep different records. An Episcopal record is going to have baptisms near the time of birth. A Baptist church is not going to have lists of those. You may find a cradle roll once Sunday school was happening for the nursery, but church records can be helpful for other things. Newspapers. Wills and probate records of potential slave owners. We talked about that last month. Family papers of potential slave owners. Those can sometimes be really hard to find, but if you can find them, they can be a treasure trove. And then again, property records and deed books, because sales of enslaved are often registered in the property books. Um, Not always. They're usually not indexed. As full text search is coming in, that is helping that, but there are also projects that we'll look at one that helps list some of these things. So, on the South Carolina State Library's website, they host the South Carolina Digital Library. Um, and there are, they say, abstracts of voter registrations reported to the military government in 1868. This collection has evolved since it was first put up. And so it now includes images and other things. So these are the 1868 um, registers of, remember, it was only males, but males who were eligible to vote. So this is what the full page looks like. And I'm going to fly in a closer look here. This is in the Glen Springs precinct of Spartanburg County. Um, and you see here, this particular collector of information didn't have a lot to say in the remarks page. Some do, some don't. But you see that description, they are either white or colored. And then these are alphabetical by name, at least within the letter it starts with. So these are the C's: Cunningham, Cannon, uh, etc. And then in the colored, Cooper, etc. Now, underneath where they show you the image, there is a transcript line. In order to get the transcript, you do have to click on the little down arrow, and then it will say, hey, this is Spartanburg County, 1st Region Precinct, Glen Springs Electoral Precinct. It's page 15 within that, and it starts with white, Aiken David, white, Anders WJ, colored, Adams Alex, colored, Anderson John, etc. These are Google searchable. If you just start Googling that person's name and you see the South Carolina Digital Library show up with something, it is possibly these records. And you can get them in to a smaller part of Spartanburg County than maybe you knew before. And you can see who the white people were in that precinct as well as the African American people were and compare names. Now, some of the handwriting was very hard to read, and remember that standard spelling is a 20th century concept. It's kind of going the way of the dinosaur now with texting and abbreviations, but it wasn't standard wasn't standard at that time. Names did get spelled and transcribed wrong. Kristen on the Kennedy Room team did a significant portion of the Spartanburg County transcription with the staff of the Richland County Walker Local and Family History Center coordinating the statewide project. So all of the voter registrations that we have for 1868 have been transcribed as far as I know. And they should be available through this collection on the website. So some of the counties may be ongoing, but the records are here. Oops. So next, so Freedmen's Bureau records. And Freedmen's Bureau has a much longer name, abandoned lands, and it wasn't just African Americans, poor whites that were displaced by the Civil War um, in the South had some resources provided through the Freedmen's Bureau. But mostly they worked with the freed African Americans, former enslaved, trying to help them get on their feet. There, these records were created between 1865 and 1872. Ours didn't start till a little bit later, and did not continue all the way to 1872. So it just depends on where you are, how long the Freedmen's Bureau was active in the area, and they give insight into the early Reconstruction era. The joint project to index these records is now hosted through FamilySearch.org. Um, some of the major players in that were Family Search, the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, the African American Historical and Genealogical Society. I think I got that right. Um, Ahas. Aghas. But anyway, um, so a lot of people did a lot of work on this. There was a portal through a site called discoverfreedmen.org. And when I Googled that today, it took me straight to the Family Search page. Within Family Search, I still haven't figured out how to get to this page, and I tried 4 or 5 different ways. So you may want to do the discoverfreedmen.org as long as Google will redirect you to this. You do need a free Family Search login for this collection, because it connects to the records that are digitized, and Family Search needs to track access to those records, um, so they can give the aggregate report that X number of users accessed X number of images this month to the stakeholders who provided the information to be digitized and placed online. Um, these may be part of the new full text search as well. I didn't play around with that today, but we will be talking about that full text search next month. So I did a search for one of my ancestors who I know is in the Freedmen's Bureau records in the labor contracts as a contractor rather than a contractee. And so I did a search for R.A. Rouse in South Carolina. And you can see it searched a bunch of collections. A lot of the time at Family Search, you go to a record set and you're searching one roll of microfilm or one record. Sometimes you can do collections of records like statewide wills and probate, but then you often have to go to the roll of microfilm digitized, but the roll of microfilm to scan through. So this collection, if you approach it through that portal, gets you the search for all of the Freedmen's Bureau records and rolls that they have. So you'll see the first result here is R.A. Rouse, principal. So he's a principal name on the record. United States Freedmen's Bureau labor contracts, indenture, and apprenticeship records, 1865 to 1872. And he was in Darlington, South Carolina, United States. And there are a couple of these records, or at least different indexing to get to the record. He was working with a James Carter. I do know that previously both of them had worked circa 1850, 1849 to 1851 or 2. They had both worked for the McKeever family, and I had found them in being paid as overseers for the Marlborough plantation for the McKeever family in that time period due to um, a probate file for um, one of the McKeevers. They had to wait till the son got to be 21 years old so he could inherit. So it's a nice long hundreds of pages probate file. So at least 3 years, R.A. Rouse is being paid as an overseer for the Marlboro plantation. So clicked into that top record, and it's an employment record in Darlington, South Carolina. It's a film on film number 74 from the collection from the National Archives that is M1910. Microfilm 1910 is the number of the collection within the National Archives microfilm sequence. And then on the left there it is, records of the field offices for the state of South Carolina, Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. So it just got called the Freedmen's Bureau because that was most of what they did. Um, and sorry, I couldn't remember that earlier. The brain has had snow days. But clicking into this, you can see this is image 961 of 1303 on this particular roll of film. And it is District of Darlington and R.A. Rouse and J.K. Carter on the one part and the enslaved mentioned at the end. And there are Carters and McKeevers and McBees and a whole bunch of former enslaved who have not yet adopted a surname. So this is a record set that sometimes you'll see repeated labor contracts over a couple of years, and formerly enslaved person will have taken a surname at some point or will have changed surnames in the midst of this. So it's somewhat a lot to dig through, but it's very interesting. In some research into this particular contract or the neighboring contract, one of them, it was not approved by the Freedmen's Bureau as a valid labor contract, and I haven't quite figured out what slick thing they were trying to pull on the former enslaved, but it wasn't approved because it wasn't fair. So, can't pick your ancestors at all. They are who they were. So, we're going to move on because you can explore that to your heart's content, as Judy Russell would say, at 2 a.m. in your bunny slippers. So, um, we have a fantastic collection from Newsbank that's called Black Life in America. If you are not a Spartanburg County resident and don't have one of our library cards, you may be able to get a out of county library card. I'm not sure. And they do cover our databases. They do not cover our like our Libby and our Hoopla and our e-reader audiobook services, unfortunately, because that's very expensive. But do check with your local libraries because they may have this collection. This is the Newsbank one. ProQuest also has a Black Life something uh, database. And so you may find some great stuff in here. This covers the whole US and has some global resources. And it's just fascinating and it dates across time. So I just wanted to share this with you. I did the map search at the bottom right just to show you all the coverage of this. This is their world. There are 803 sources in Africa, 895 sources in Asia, over 1,000 sources in Australia and Oceania. You may not need these resources, but maybe your person was in the Merchant Marine or something. Um, but there are 15,000, almost 16,000 sources for North America. And so I went to North America, to United States, and then to South Carolina. And then I searched for emancipation. because when I did Spartanburg, it brought me up the Spartanburg papers. So you do not get the entire newspaper on all of these because they want us libraries to purchase our own newspapers. And we do have the Spartanburg newspapers from Newsbank from 1906 to the current, available on our on a database. That might be worth seeing if you can get that digital or that out of county card. I think it's $35 still. But this has 19,202 results in South Carolina about emancipation. And they range from 1870, sorry, 1785, the article that is snippeted here, which is an extract of a letter from a gentleman in London to his relation in this city, which was Charleston, in a paper called the Columbian Herald, published as the Columbian Herald or the Patriotic Courier of North America in Charleston, South Carolina. And so you never know where the stuff is going to come from, which is why you may not want to limit all the way to South Carolina, and you may want to see what's in the English papers back and forth. But also, the Charleston Post and Courier published an article yesterday talking about Black History Month that mentioned the word emancipation. So you never know what you're going to find, and it doesn't hurt to search keywords, names, locations. Um, if you're going to do a location, you may need to narrow things down. You can sort by best match, by newest, by oldest. You can select a period of time at the bottom left of your screen there. All of those bars have a decade in connected with them, and you can get things down. I'm not looking through 19,200 newspaper articles. I need to focus my research further than that. But you can add a place, you can add a date range. There is an advanced search. This is just basic search. So, and I do recommend trying names in quotes. I will tell you, I had the dickens of a time with a great great uncle in Macon, Georgia, because he went by his initials JLB, not Joseph Lysander Birch Kelly, but JLB. And Newsbank limits you to only two initials. It gives you an error message if you try to do three initials in a row. I'm not sure why, because USA is three initials in a row. So anyway, but so I did J. Kelly, I did JL Kelly in quotes, couple of different searches, and I did find some great articles about him, not in Black uh, this database, but in a sister database. So you never know. You may find something really cool. Okay, the next resource I did mention last month, and I had forgotten to animate my screen. So now you can actually see what the Greenville Public Library's uh, digital collections looks like for their upstate African American genealogy. Their page is alphabetized. So go to the fifth and final page so that you can get to upstate. But they started this project a decade ago at least. And their South Carolina room staff started identifying names of enslaved mentioned in probate records. They started with Greenville County because that's their home county, but they have completed Greenville, Lawrence, Pendleton, Anderson, Pickens, and Spartanburg counties. Yes, they were kind enough to do Spartanburg for us. And now my colleague Cheryl is working to complete Union County, and we're hoping to continue passing this to some of the other upstate counties to continue the project as personnel um, allows and time allows. But it is a listing, and here is an example of a page that the date range, the date is when the probate was probated. The primary enslaver's name is the person whose probate it is. Secondary enslaver's name is the person who is inheriting, per the probate, the enslaved person who is mentioned. The secondary enslaver's relationship to the primary enslaver. So, is the wife inheriting? Is the son inheriting? We don't know what the relationship is. They may have purchased the enslaved person at an auction, um, that kind of thing. And then you get the name, first name, because enslaved were not allowed to have surnames, but the first name of the enslaved. And then if there is a description, sometimes you get Negro woman, you get Pat's child, you get Negro boy, you get Peter's wife. So sometimes you get very helpful identifying information to put a family unit together. If an age is given, sometimes they do give an age in a inventory of the estate. And if an age is given, that is provided in the index and the probate value assigned. And then you also get the estate packet. So you now know the county, you now know the estate packet, and you now know who you're looking for in that estate packet. I highly recommend going to that estate and actually reading the document. As Cheryl can tell you, some of the handwriting is absolutely atrocious. So we have done our best collectively as librarians and archivists working on this project to get the names right. But yeah, may have to uh, do some alternate spellings and things. But if you know who an enslaver might have been, these records are great to just browse through to see if names are lining up. So, um, and again, that covers these counties of the upstate. We're working on Union County. If you have Union County questions, just contact the Kennedy Room. We can have Cheryl look in the information for you, up to whatever she's done at this point. But these are types of projects that are being done at the local level. Um, and next, I just want to mention some of the types of family and plantation records that you may want to be on the lookout for. I don't have images of any of these in this program. There is a program from a couple of years ago that I did on this topic. But you may be able to find plantation ledgers and records. They may be in an archive somewhere. They may still be on that property in the attic. Some people have had good luck just making a reach out to whoever's living there, particularly if they are still in the family, to see if these records exist and if they can take a look in them. Sometimes they will say, oh no, they went in the dumpster years ago. Sometimes they will say, oh, my cousin so and so, the family genealogist has them. You know, you may get lucky. But you may find Archives Grid when it's working um, is a good place to search. Google searches if there's an online finding aid for a collection. It may be under the family member's name. So, broaden your search just out beyond your ancestors to the family and the descendants of the possible enslavers. Again, wills, probate, equity, or chancery cases, they can be a gold mine. So when probate fails or gets stuck, or somebody's under 21, like there's a 1 year old and the kids from the first marriage are well over 21 and want to move west, that third marriage is infant, is mucking things up for settling the case. So equity court in South Carolina, chancery court in Virginia, um, different states use different terms for that, but those are the two major ones I've seen, at least in the Southeast. And so those are the courts where they go and it's written testimony, and the judge makes a decision and divides the estate equitably. Um, and they can settle it before that youngest is 21 if someone brings the case. Now, in this, just know the formality of the case is somebody has to do somebody versus the rest of the estate in order to get this in active in the court. It does not mean they were at each other's throats. It did not mean they were fighting. It was just the formality of how the case had to be written. So one of these days I'm going to do a Virginia Chancery Court case program, because I've got some fun ones in my family. Library of Virginia has the chancery, many of the chancery cases available up through the early 1900s now for a lot of the counties, not all the counties, but many of the counties. Um, you're going to look at deeds, particularly for the sale of enslaved persons. And again, these are not likely to be in the indexes because the indexes were often done after the period of slavery, and it wasn't worth mentioning because everybody was only interested in the land, according to the clerks of court. So you may have to do some digging. Um, the full text search, again, may be our best friend on this. You're going to want to look for dower or gifts of enslaved to daughters or wives, because wives could own personal property. They could not own real property for a very long time in South Carolina. So real estate, not necessarily because of coverture, but you're going to want to look for women owning enslaved more than we ever thought. The more I look into it, the more women in my family that, dad wanted to protect daughter from not having income that she could use, and the income from those enslaved that she was gifted, the son-in-law couldn't sell them without going through the process of her permission and that kind of thing. And so there were good reasons for dower rights in South Carolina. You may find a family website that has done some of the research into this. You may want to check for research done by other genealogists and publications such as the National Genealogical Society Quarterly or Historical Society newsletters, those types of things. You may find newspaper advertisements or notices of property sales. Again, pre-emancipation, if they were not free people of color, often are named in these. And then you may luck out and find diaries or family letters. Um, and it's luck of the draw. But sometimes you get lucky. And we live in hope that we're going to find that record that proves that next generation back. Um, Another resource that I haven't talked about tonight and don't talk about much in this context, but that is DNA. DNA research can be helpful. Um, Test the oldest family members that you can test, um, because they are generations closer than most of us are. And the closer you are to that common ancestor, the easier the DNA is to look at. But that's a DNA program, and I've got a bunch of those in the archive as well. But February 2021 is when I did the Family and Plantation Records program. So take a look at that. So, do we have questions? I saw a couple comments slide across my other screen over here. Um, so I'm gonna.
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Okay.
Let's see. Where Joseph would like to know where he could find state laws concerning slaves for South Carolina.
Okay, those are going to be in the South Carolina Code of Laws. And we have a significant set on a shelf at our library that I generally have to go back to. There are some resources, some of them are on places like archive.org. There are some links to the historical ones, but you kind of have to know what you're looking for. And so, when I was researching exactly when divorce became legal in South Carolina, because when I moved here, I was told 1950. I was doing a deeper dive into it and realized when we got our digitized Spartanburg Herald Journal a couple years ago that January 1st of 1950, 785 or something like that, divorces had already been granted in Spartanburg County in the previous year. So that would have been 1949. So what I did was I went to the current Code of Laws and then found the divorce statute, looked at the bottom, and it said this replaced statute, whatever. And I went back revision by revision to the divorce statute. But that works for something that's currently in the law. For slavery, you're looking earlier. And I'm going to have to see what resources there are. There are probably some books on researching enslaved in South Carolina or some sections of books that might tell you what parts of the code to look at pre 1865 because they're in those book code of law books. Um, so uh, email here kroom@infodepot.org. Shoot us an email and we'll try to get you a better answer on that. And
Okay, and then
yes,
also wanted to know about South Carolina state censuses, what we have.
state censuses. We have a couple of fragments. 1869 is one of the fragments. Spartanburg does not exist in that. Union County does. But that's about it. There was an earlier one, and 1829, 1839, something that there are a few fragments for. Um, they may be available. Those fragments may be available on the uh, South
You think?
Carolina Department of Archives and History
Yeah, yeah.
uh, webpage. I'm not positive. We have microfilm for all that have been microfilmed. But again, they're few and far between. They are fragments, unfortunately. But we've got all of the state censuses. The federal uh, on the 0 year censuses.
Okay,
Okay, Dr.
and
Faith
then
Thomas
there was Miss
says
Thomas.
the Rouse family.
Yeah.
Which Rouses and mine are in Darlington County, may have a Marion County connection, but I can't find R.A. Rouse's daddy. His mama may have been Zilpha. Um, there is a Charleston Rouse family, and my generations are half a generation off of theirs. So they're not my direct line. Let's see.
I think those were the only
Yes.
questions, but I did want to reiterate something that you mentioned about the Union County, Greenville County, and Spartanburg
Mhm.
County um, enslaved records. Those are very, very useful to anyone researching enslaved during the period. Um, it yeah, and you're right. My eyesight has worsened since I started working on the Union County ones, but it's worth it. And if you're searching for someone in Union County or Spartanburg County, please don't hesitate to call or visit our Kennedy room. We would be happy to help you with that.
Um, yes, and it's just one of those resources that we're sorry it's taken us this long to figure out how to do it and get it available, but we're also now in the digital era where we can get it available online a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes things happen at the time they need to happen for having the resources available. Yes, Dr. Thomas, please email me. Because I every time I've been down in Darlington at the Historical Commission researching, I meet somebody who's like, "Well, I've never met a white Rouse before." So there's a connection somewhere. So, yes. Yes, just send an email to that email address and it will get through to me. I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate everybody coming tonight, and those watching us online later on the recording. And we'll see you next month for Family Search Resources Beyond the Tree. So, thank you very much.
All right. Good night.
And,
Okay. Do you want me to stop the recording
yep,
now?
stop the recording, please.
Okay.
Thank you.